Good morning, everyone. Welcome to this final webinar of the SocialRES. If it's fine for you, we are recording the webinars, so it's important that you know it. Then we will post it in our social media and on SocialRES website, YouTube, LinkedIn, and Twitter. I'm very happy to be with you today. Happy and sad at the same time. Happy because I'm grateful to share with you the last result of the SocialRES project. And let's say sad because it's the last webinar of SocialRES. My name is Silvia from Renewable Energies. I'm the coordinator of SocialRES. I'm here today with you, as I said, for these final webinars of the SocialRES project. And so I share the presentation. So you will see all the content. Okay. Perfect. To be in presentation. Okay. As I said, please do not hesitate to of a webinar. We will be more than to, let's say, to either you can also interrupt me. I think we have a problem with Zoom this morning.
Yes, yeah, we cannot hear you properly.
Okay, I'm back now. There was a message that Zoom was not working properly. Okay, but I hope now I start again. Sorry, it never happened before. It's the last webinar, of course. Okay, so let's share it again. Can you hear me properly now, Alice?
Yes, perfectly.
Okay, let's try again the presentation. Okay, perfect. Can you see the presentation in a presentation mode?
Yes.
Okay, perfect. Just please stop me or write me in a message if you don't see me disappearing. Okay, so thanks a lot for your time today for this last webinar of the SocialRES project. As I said, my name is Silvia Caneva. I'm the coordinator of SocialRES. I'm very happy to be with you here to provide this presentation and then introduce also the speaker of this last webinars. In my presentation today, I will provide with an overview of the final agenda of these final webinars, an overview of the previous SocialRES webinars, few sentences, a few slides on the global warming and the consequences that we see as the climate emergency, an overview of the SocialRES project, and then I will close with the legacy of SocialRES. So today with me, we have our SocialRES partners that they are going to provide you really the presentation with their final result that they have achieved in SocialRES. We have Iban Lizzaralde from ESTIA that will provide you with an overview of the barriers that the citizens see in taking part of this green energy transition. Then Iban Petrov from Trinity College Dublin will explain, provide you the result that he has found from different surveys that we have carried out in SocialRES in order to see the behavior of the citizens when approaching the green energy transition. Karl Harder from Abundance, how crowdfunding can support the citizens in the clean energy transition, and Volker Kromrey from Constance Foundation, how the cooperative can support the citizens. And Kathrin Anger will close from Adelphi the webinars with the policy overview, how politics can support the green energy transition. Before giving the floor to our relevant speakers, I would like to tell you that all the previous webinars of SocialRES have been uploaded in YouTube. We had 13 webinars, and this is the number 14, therefore. In these 13 webinars, we have addressed all the topic of the SocialRES. Each webinar was more or less 1 hour, and so you have more or less 13 hours. It will be 15 with these webinars about social innovation for energy in the YouTube channel of SocialRES. Then a few words about the global warming, because in this webinar, we want to provide a solution to mitigate this emergency, this climate emergency. So as you know, we are in a climate emergency because this was generated by anomalous global warming effect. This is a comparison in the summer 1976 with summer 2022. And you already see that, that we have this anomalous increase of temperature in the summer. I don't have to remind you how was last summer with 40 degrees, the 20th of July in Germany, 31, 32 degrees in Canada, in the north part of Canada, and 47 degrees in California on the 5th of September. This is generating, as we know, consequences. In Italy, just yesterday, we have another storm flood in Ischia. There was one 2 months ago in Marche, again in Italy, but not only in Italy. I put this Italian picture because I'm Italian, but all the world is suffering for the consequences of the global warming. What is important to say is the global warming, first of all, is a social issue than an environmental issues. I say that as an environmental engineer because we have to think that you see from this graph that the first column is the population, the second column, the share of the global emission. So the red part and the yellow part, the red part is 1% of the population, the yellow part, the 9%. So you see how the red part, the yellow part, in total, the 10% of population are generating almost the 50% of the global emission. Denmark, before COP27, was offering this lost and damage fund to the poor country. I remember well the COP27 was going in this direction, but in my opinion, what we have to do is to avoid the CO2 emission, not providing funding to the consequences of the global warming. In terms of CO2 emission, we are now more than 400 ppm. A comparison with the late 70s is that we were at 336 ppm. But what is very important is to see that since ever, we never had this high level of concentration of CO2 emission in the atmosphere. Indeed, in the right part of the graph, you see that we are higher than 400 ppm. In the left part of the graph is in the ice ages, the concentration of CO2 emission in the ice ages that was less than 200 ppm. So you see here that we never had this kind of CO2 concentration in the atmosphere. That's why it's generating the climate emergency that we see. One solution, some possible solution for this climate emergency are the social innovation investigated in almost 4 years of SocialRES. SocialRES is a project co-financed by the European Commission under the Horizon 2020 program. It started in August, in May 2019, should have been finalized in August 22, but we have asked for an extension. That's why we are finalizing it in 1 month. The title, let's say, of SocialRES is fostering social innovative and inclusive strategies for empowering citizens in the renewable energy market of the future. WIP is the coordinator of SocialRES. We have 13 partners, 8 European member states. The total budget was 2.5 million euro. The website is socialres.eu, where you can find all the information about SocialRES. Very important is SocialRES is the definition of social innovation that we have adapted during the project, still in the proposal preparation. In SocialRES, we have investigated 4 types of social innovation. So renewable energy, cooperative energy community, aggregator or prosumers, a crowdfunding platform. This was done not only to provide a solution to the climate emergency with a business model to foster, to support the renewable energy production, but also to assess, to address the social need of the society. So with the renewable energy cooperative community, we are addressing the citizen involvement, therefore the sense of belonging to the citizens, to our cities where they live. If we think in a city like Milano, for instance, that 50% of the population is a single, they are living alone. Social innovation in this case, like cooperative, can really support the quality of life of the citizens in this kind of setting. With crowdfunding, we provide a return on investment of the people investing, or the citizens investing in crowdfunding. That's for we are taking care, let's say, of the financial sustainability of this social innovation. And with a peer-to-peer energy trading platform, so with the aggregation of prosumer, we are providing cheaper, let's say better electricity tariff, because we have an energy more competitive. Also in this case, especially in these days with the price of electricity, we see how much important is to have a tool that is providing this kind of innovation. Therefore, there is the name of SocialRES. RES is for renewable energy system. Therefore, social innovation providing green electricity is social because at the same time we are addressing these needs like sense of belonging, better energy competitiveness and financial sustainability. So this is really the core aspect of SocialRES. In order to implement this idea, we have in the project, as I said, 13 partners representing 8 member states. They are representing 9 case studies among cooperative aggregators and crowdfunding. So we have Bodens and Stiftung, so like Constance Foundation, Tracklabel, Regea. We have Goparity, Energetica, INR, Abundance as case studies provider. And then, of course, the partners that we needed in SocialRES to implement the idea behind SocialRES. And so Adelphi is our policy expert, WIP is the coordinator, Icons is our communication, dissemination, exploitation expert, Cartif is the energy behavioral expert, Trinity College Dublin, again, the behavioral expert of this project. And all together, we have really provided the result in SocialRES. I like to call the partners SocialRES citizens because with their case studies provider, they are really putting in practice day by day, walking the talk of what they said. And so what they really present in SocialRES is their real life, what they are doing to support the citizens in this clean energy transition. We have created in these 4 years a kind of, I like to call a virtual library in the SocialRES website, where you find all the report, deliverable, newsletter, articles that we have published in SocialRES in these last years. So if you go in socialres.eu, you find everything. Putting people at the heart of energy transition is one of the deliverables that we have written in collaboration with all the 4 sister projects of SocialRES. And then we have all the deliverables written in the SocialRES consortium. We have, let's say, these are only some of the results. You will find more in the SocialRES website. And you see here that in SocialRES, let's say we had 3 phases, the research, innovation, and policy phase. In the research part, we were really investigating the social innovation aspect of the social innovation with the information provided by the case studies provider. In innovation part, we had developed a new business model for social innovation. In the policy part, okay, we have seen how politics is addressing social innovation to provide a clean energy transition. I close the presentation with the legacy of SocialRES, that is the ESTIA, the European Social Innovation Platform, where you really find, we have decided to create this platform to keep alive, the need to have information about social innovation. In the platform, indeed, you find information about social innovation, but also the name of expert of social innovation. So I kindly ask you to visit it, asip.eu. This was the last slide. I already see that Iban is ready. Good, Iban, because you are the next speaker. I don't know if there are any questions from the moment from the audience. No. Otherwise, now I'm happy to introduce you, Iban. So Iban Lizzaralde is from ESTIA, is our partner that was involved in this innovation part, I would say, of social innovation. And Iban is with us today to provide a presentation about the barriers that are stopping, let's say, the citizens in investing in this green energy transition. So Iban, I'm happy to give the floor to you. Yes, you are muted.
Thank you very much, Silvia.
Yeah.
I will like to share with you my slides.
Yeah, I'll let you know when I see it. If you can put in presentation, perfect. Okay.
That fine?
Yes, it's fine.
Okay, let's start. Perfect. Thanks again to everybody. So let me introduce you some of the results, mainly related to the barriers, but we will talk also about the motivations of the citizens. And this presentation is based mainly on the work that have been done in the Work Package 2 and Work Package 4 of the SocialRES project. So as it's in the Work Package 2, we've been mainly working on the analysis of driving factors. And these driving factors, of course, include the barriers, the main barriers that have the citizens. And these have allowed us also to start working on the business model aspect. So working with barriers and motivation has allowed us to identify which are the existing business models, and then try to imagine the new emergent business models and the services. This is very linked to the Work Package 4. We mainly work on this networking and co-creation, mutual learning, and which the main results of collaborative business models. As Silvia explained, these collaborative business models have mainly include 3 cases or 3 business models, which are the energy cooperative, crowdfunding platforms, and peer-to-peer platforms that are included in the aggregator scope. We always focus on the value proposition that has always been identified by the European Union, which is sustainable energy, secure energy, and this is important also. We have seen the last months, which is the importance to have a secure grid and secure the provision, but also an affordable energy. We don't have to forget in SocialRES, we mainly working on social innovations and how important it is that this energy is affordable for all the Europeans. So in this framework, I would like to say that one of the issues that have emerged also during the SocialRES project is the energy community concept, and which is what's not really identified in the beginning of this project, but of course many changes have changed the last 3 years, and I will discuss in the next slides some of the new innovations and some of the changes concerning the legal framework that, of course, we have taken into account in the SocialRES project. So, in order to go on with my slides, I would like to use a case study that we've been that I've been using as a track in this presentation. So it's a case study that was about by ENR, which is the member of the consortium of SocialRES, and it's an energy cooperative, member of RES Group, and working in the Basque region in France. So this case study, it's a collective self-consumption project, and let me present you this project because I think it's a good example to show you first the synergies that we can find between these energy cooperatives, social crowdfunding platforms and aggregators, and the synergies that we can find within a new project, within a new business model. But also it's a good example to show you, to present to you the barriers and the motivations, and to see through this project what kind of barriers we can see nowadays in very accurate projects. So I would like to tell you that this project actually was not identified at the beginning of SocialRES. So for me, it's a good example because it wasn't identified at the beginning of SocialRES. So it's a project that is right now. ENR is working right now on this project since some weeks, let's say, and yes, so it's a collective self-consumption project. So basically, ENR is preparing the installation of more than 1,000 kilowatt PV installation, so a photovoltaic installation that will allow to work with the consumers in a scope of 20 kilometers. So we have a 20 kilometers diameter scope in this territory, which is next to this PV installation. So it's then these consumers will have the possibility to use this energy directly. So it's a good example also from the social point of view, because as a social innovation, there are, of course, ENR as a cooperative working on this project, but also another cooperative. So it's a collaboration between the two cooperatives. There is also a local citizen association, so it's working very close with citizens. Also some municipalities working this project, and of course some companies. So we will see later which are the main points concerning these stakeholders and which kind of synergy we can find in this model. So this allows us first to talk a little bit about energy cooperatives. I'm not going to get into the details of the cooperatives. Right now, we have almost 2,000 cooperatives in Europe, members of the RESCOOP network. But I would like mainly to introduce you a concept that was not identified at the very beginning of the SocialRES. It's something new. It's something coming from the clean energy package, which are the citizen energy communities and renewable energy communities. So thanks mainly to the renewable energy communities, we have the more and more legal frameworks. So each state of the European Union have a legal framework to work with these energy communities, which allow us to develop new business models. And we will see that we can have the more and more synergies between energy cooperatives, but also the aggregation platforms and crowdfunding tools or crowdfunding platforms. So in this case, for example, if we take again this project, we realize that a big company working on the energy sector cannot develop this project. If we go to the energy, to the renewable energy community definition, we see that it's based on a voluntary and open participation. And it's effectively controlled by members and shareholders, which are supposed citizens. And in this case, it's a good example also because we can see that not only citizens are participating in this project, but also local authorities. Some municipalities are directly participating in the funding of this project, but also in letting some municipal buildings in order to install these PV panels. There are also small enterprises participating. This is important because enterprises can participate, but it must be small enterprises which are not directly working in the energy sector, and of course, which are within the scope of this project. Then, the main purpose of this project should not only be the production of electricity, but it's also to provide environmental, economic, and social community benefits. And here we can see that the main objectives of the SocialRES are and if I start finding the first synergies within this project, would be an interesting tool, and it has been analyzed to include within this collective self-production and self-consumption projects. Here, which you will see in the different documents, on two scenarios. It's the crowd investing and the crowd lending. So right now, the members of this project are working on the crowd lending initiative that will be supporting the cooperatives that are investing in these projects. But this is not still completely decided. And here we can identify the first barriers related to this crowdfunding and crowd investing tools. On one hand, it should be logic to go for a crowd lending tool, as we have seen in other interesting use case in the SocialRES project, as the abundance investment project, which were related to the climate change bonds, working with the municipalities in UK. And this is a good example of how municipalities can access to interest in fundings to invest on renewable energies. But in this case, what we realize is that actually the lending aspect of the project is not the biggest problem, because this project from economic point of view, it's interesting, and actually banks are following this project. That means that we can have actually we can have some banks funding this project with an interesting interest rates. So actually we can realize that the lending aspect is not the most important issues. So on one hand, we of money, and to have a crowd participating in the project. But on the other hand, if you choose the crowd lending, then you are taking the part that for the moment it's already assured by the bank funding. So we can bring a concrete amount of funding in a participation point of view. If you don't bring, and in this case, it's 20% of the amount of the investment, if you don't bring this amount of investment in a participation way, then the banks, of course, don't follow. So I find it's a good example to see also the first synergies between cooperative and crowdfunding platforms. The next step, of course, are aggregators. And in the case of crowdfunding, we've been working mainly in the Tractable case study, which is a very specific aggregator case. It's a peer-to-peer energy trading platform. And we can see that from the aggregate demand aspects, demand side aspects. So in this case, should be applied in Romania, so it's one European state. In this case, as we have seen, the legal framework is limited to 20 kilometers. Which means that from a scope point of view, it's a more narrow scope, and we should deal with these aggregation aspects within this scope. And that's why there are new tools that emerge to work solutions that are emerged by based on blockchains. So there are several startups that propose tools to work on this aggregation and peer-to-peer trading based on the blockchain. And in the case of France, the DSO, the French DSO, is also proposing specific tools to deal with peer-to-peer tradings within this scope of 20 kilometers. I have to say that this specific case is for the France. Other European states have different scopes, and in other states, this is not you can see on the screen. So one of the main barriers, of course, it's a lack of funding. The passivity of society is something that we have identified in many projects. Administrative and bureaucratic barriers, of course. Absence of legal framework. And another big barrier is also the lack of access of the information which is needed in order to apply this kind of project. Another barrier is the deficiency of society to open up the experience of other groups and the lack of experience carrying out these social innovation projects. The last one that we have identified is the passivity and low level of stakeholders support. So in these cases, and if I come back to our project, we can see that passivity in society, it's not only a barrier that we have identified in other projects. In this case also, we can see how much difficult it is to develop this kind of social innovation within a territory, and where people are supposed to be interested in the project, but still there are very big difficulties to work with different citizens within this scope. And the next one, of course, is the absence of legal framework. And this is also a very good example. Even if we have a European directive, even if we have having a legal framework within each state, still there are many, many barriers. And in this case, for example, even within the French state, we have the more and more details of legal framework. There are still some barriers within that framework that are directly related, for example, to the economical aspects. In this case, for example, there is a specific tax that is applied to the use of the grid, but of course, this specific tax make the project not viable economically, or for the moment, and not viable, let's say. So we can see that either we don't have a legal framework, either when we start having a legal framework, there are some specific points that are still a barrier for the project. And this allows me to show you also some motivations also that we have identified, and finally allow us to go on with these projects and to go within with these barriers. So within the SocialRES project, we have identified several motivations, individual-oriented motivations, but also communal-based oriented motivations, and some practice-oriented. Of course, the main motivations are economical motivations and ecological motivations. But we have identified also that there are some personal development motivations, some political reasons, some territorial motivations, and social relationship motivations. So I would like to start with the first motivation, because when we started this project, this was this part of return on investment, and it's something that we have also checked in other projects. It's people are looking for an economical return of their investment, which, let's say, it's normal. But what we realize, and in this case, it's a very good example, there are more and more economical interests are related to cheaper electricity prices. So it's not only about return on investment of the citizens. No, this is a good example, because here we are working on the collective self-consumption. At the beginning, there were some citizens interested, but now in the last months, as soon as the electricity bills have grown up, we see that there are more and more citizens, and I will say there are more and more collectivities and companies that are interested to get in the project because they can see that they can reduce the energy bills. So it's a little bit, it's also economical motivation, but it's a little bit different. Then, from a political, territorial, and ecological motivations, of course, the main motivations that we have identified, it's the motivation related to climate change. The participants are willing to reduce the climate change, and there are many people participating in this project working on that. But also, this is interesting in the fact that having a specific territory, a specific scope of 20 kilometers, we realize there are many people that also think about the involvement of the different actors in the territory, also to go for more resilient territory and the creation of jobs, new job creations in this territory. Finally, I would like to show you also some personal development motivations that we have identified in this project. There are many people in this specific case that would like to test the new technologies in this project. it's a motivation also. It's the reality that we have seen in some projects, and also social relationship and motivation. There are many people that will like to create a new governance structure. They would like to discuss really a fair price, and it's very related to the goals of SocialRES projects. Here we are in the core of the social innovation, and we can see very well with this project because citizens and companies are investing on this photovoltaic plant, but they will be using directly the electricity produced. That means that they have to create a new governance structure in order to find a good balance between the selling price and the price that will be paid by the consumers. So we can see that it's possible to create this governance, specific structures, merging the citizens, but also already existing cooperatives, also municipalities. So we can see that this kind of synergies can allow us to stop some of the barriers that we have identified at the beginning. So I will stop here. You have seen one of part of the results of the SocialRES through an example, mainly the barriers that we have identified, also the motivations, and also the synergies that we have identified between energy cooperatives, crowdfunding platforms, and aggregators. Thank you very much.
Thanks to you, Iban, for this relevant presentation. As we know, your part of the project was in the beginning of the project, where we have defined the foundation, how we say, of SocialRES. The research carried out in this phase was very relevant, of course, also the other part of the research. But thanks again, Iban. Let's see if you can stop sharing. Oh, perfect. So I see if we have any question. If you should have any question, please, you can, there is a button, as you know, in Zoom, when you can raise your hand. And I will see that you have your hand. I will give you the floor for the question. If no question are here, no. So I give now the floor to Ivan. Ivan Petrov is our expert from Trinity College Dublin related to the behavioral aspect. So Ivan, I have seen that you were connected a few seconds ago. You disappeared. Ah, no, you're here, yes. Okay, I see your yourselves. So Ivan is our, let's say, expert on a behavioral aspect of social innovation. Trinity College Dublin was carried out several surveys in SocialRES. More than 10,000 citizens has been contacted, I would say, to ask their several questions about social innovation, but I don't want to tell you anything. I give now the floor to Ivan with your presentation. Thanks a lot, Ivan. The floor is yours.
Thank you, Silvia. So can you see my screen?
Yes, if you can put in presentation mode.
Yep, okay, is that okay?
Yeah, perfect, thanks a lot.
Cheers, thank you, thanks a million, Silvia. So yeah, as Silvia said, my name is Ivan. I'm a postdoctoral researcher at Trinity College Dublin in the Department of Economics. And what I'm going to present today is some of the work we've done for Work Package 3, which looks at some of the behavioral aspects in relation to social innovation. So just a brief outline in terms of what I'm going to present. So firstly, what did we do, who we are, etc. The survey design and distribution, which kind of gives away a little bit what we did, some of the results that come from the survey, and some of the publications we've been working on from these results. So firstly, what do we do? So we're a research institution. And I guess one of the main aims of SocialRES was to close the non-technological research gaps that impede the widespread uptake of social innovation. So how do we get people to participate, or the general public to participate in social innovation projects? And so we have several research questions that stem from that. So firstly, what aspects or attributes of energy cooperatives, crowdfunding, and peer-to-peer platforms are important to attract investors, or to attract members of the general public to invest in these models? How do early participants in these models differ from the general public? And then finally, why might people opt out of participation? And so to answer these research questions, we did surveys. So we did surveys of the general population, and we did surveys in 12 countries in total, with three sort of different versions of the survey. So we had one version looking specifically at cooperatives with 5 countries, one version looking specifically at crowdfunders with 5 countries, and one version looking at peer-to-peer platforms. So in total, we had about 800 responses per country, and these were nationally representative in terms of age, gender, and location. And the surveys were carried out between June and October of 2020. So just in terms of the survey structure, just to give you an idea of what the survey looked like. So it started with an introduction, so the study background, who the researchers are, over 18 confirmations, so on. Respondents were also ensured that their responses would be confidential. Then we had some warm-up screening questions, so things like education, age, gender, location. Were you ever involved in this type of an organization before? And the idea behind these was just to sort of prime people for the discrete choice experiment, which is what comes next. So start getting them to think about their energy use. And we had sort of the discrete choice experiment was kind of the main aspect of the survey, which we had 3 different versions of, one for the cooperatives, one for crowdfunders, and one for peer-to-peer platforms. Then we had some post-experimental questions, so things like environmental attitudes and concerns. And finally, we finished up with some more additional demographic or energy related questions. So things like, do you rent your property? What type of heating you have? So on. So one of the main, I guess, one of the main features of the survey was the discrete choice experiment. And the way this works is you're presented, if you look at the figure on the right, you're presented with 2 projects, let's say project A and project B. There's a number of different attributes. So in our case, we have annual return, the type of renewable energy, so mostly solar or mostly wind energy, the amount of CO2 reduction and the size of the project, the location of the project, the amount of investment required in terms of minimum investment and minimum investment duration, and the level of participation. And the way this works is respondents are presented with these choice cards, which look like this, and they pick either project A or project B, or none of the above. And from the choice that respondents make, we can actually use econometrics to back out what type of attributes they care about. And so it's a way of eliciting preferences for these attributes. And we had 3 different, so this is just an example for the cooperative version of the survey. We had 3 different versions of the survey, one looking specifically at cooperatives, one looking specifically at crowdfunders, and one looking specifically at peer-to-peer platforms. And so each respondent makes this choice 8 times. And what's also interesting is that we included, I would not choose either option, which is a little bit different. And we try and use that data to sort of gain some more insights, which I'll talk a little bit more about in a minute. So what we can do with that sort of data, or with this type of analysis, is we can look at what sort of attributes or what levels of attributes people care about. So what we can look at is willingness to accept. So what this gives us is the amount of return or on average individuals would be willing to sacrifice for one level of an attribute for another level. So if you look at the first one, for example, what this tells us is that individuals on average are willing to sacrifice about 1 percentage point of annual return for a solar relative to a wind project. So individuals prefer solar relative to wind. And we find this sort of consistently across all of the business models. What we also find is that people have preferences for projects which reduce CO2 more, and also preferences for projects which are within their local within their local area versus being outside of their outside of their country. So they dislike projects outside of their home country, or in other words, they would need to be compensated by extra return in order to engage with projects outside of their country. So in terms of some of the additional characteristics, we find that participants dislike minimum investment amounts, both for cooperatives and crowdfunders. They dislike longer minimum investment durations, in particular very long durations like 20 and 25 years. And they also tend to have a preference for in terms of crowdfunders, for contracts that are issued by local councils relative to private companies. So they dislike contracts which are issued by private entities. So for the peer-to-peer platform, we had slightly different attributes that we looked at. So we have the monthly energy saved, CO2 reduction in terms of kilograms, type of green energy, mostly wind or mostly solar, a green alert system, which could either, which alerts participants that there's green electricity being produced in their area, either on a daily, weekly, or not at all basis. The platform goal, so the platform could be designed in a way which reduces mostly their CO2 emissions, mostly their bills or both CO2 and bills at the same time, and contract length. And again, the same sort of principle applies. Participants choose either contract A or contract B, and we try to enlist their preferences from that. So just brief, very quick summary of the results. So not surprisingly, people prefer contracts with higher bill savings. They also prefer contracts which reduce carbon emissions more. Again, we find that people prefer solar relative to wind energy. They prefer weekly green electricity alerts relative to no alerts, and they do not have a preference for daily alerts. And then finally, in terms of the platform goal, we find that people prefer platforms which reduce both CO2 and energy bills at the same time. And what's interesting, I think, here is that because we had a goal of bill reduction, only either bill reduction or CO2 reduction, we didn't find a difference between people wanting to reduce either their bill or their CO2 emissions, but they want to reduce both at the same time. So finally, we can, of course, we can transform this into willingness to accept estimates, like in the way we did before for crowdfunders and cooperatives. And we see some sort of a similar pattern between countries. Now, another thing we actually did with this experiment was we ran an experiment within the discrete choice experiment where we randomized the way in which the energy cost information is presented or the energy cost savings information is presented to consumers. So it was either presented as monthly, annual, or a range of values. And we wanted to see whether or not that changed people's preferences for the bill saving attribute. So we didn't find it had an influence on their preferences for the bill saving attribute. But what we find is that presenting energy cost savings as a range of values made people choose the opt-out option fewer times, so they were less likely to opt out of the experiments. So because of the data is quite, it's a wealth of data really. We collected a bunch of different questions. We can look at some of the correlations within these, which might be interesting. So, for example, one of the questions that was asked was, have you ever been involved in an energy organization, such as an energy cooperative, an energy peer-to-peer platform, or a crowdfunded energy project? And about 15% of the respondents said yes. And what we can look at is some of the correlations with some of the other demographics variables and all the other variables that we look at in the survey. So we find that those with higher levels of education are more likely to say that they have participated in an energy organization. Those that are older are less likely, and that sort of decreases as age increases. Females are less likely to report that they've participated in an energy organization project in the past. And then if we look at some of the other variables, so things like if you've upgraded your heating system, you're also more likely to have participated in an energy organization. If you've previous investment experience, so what we mean here is investment experience in terms of investment with stocks or bonds, these kind of things, you're more likely to also say that you have invested in an energy organization. And then finally, trust. So if you have higher trust in the carbon saving claims made by these type of organizations, you're more likely to have invested or to say that you've participated in some way in these organizations. And trust seems to come up sort of regardless of the business model we look at. In terms of some of the other things we can do, so one of the options in the discrete choice experiment was you either choose project A or project B, but you could also choose none of the above. And I think that presents us with some interesting data. So above 34% of the respondents chose that opt-out option at least once. And because the respondents made the choice 8 times in a row, we can count the number of times somebody opts out. So let's say somebody that opts out 6 times versus somebody that opts out 2 times might have sort of hold more negative views towards these types of projects. And we can again look at correlations with some of the other demographic and I guess other characteristics that we look at in the survey. So we find that those that are older are more likely to choose the opt-out option more often. Females were also more likely to choose the opt-out option more often. If you have tertiary education or higher education, you're less, or you choose the opt-out option fewer times. If you've upgraded your heating system for the cooperative and crowdfunder samples, we find that you choose the opt-out option fewer times again. Previous investment experience as before, but in this case, reduces the number of times somebody chooses an opt-out option. And again, trust comes up as a very important variable in that those that have higher levels of trust in carbon saving claims choose the opt-out option fewer times, regardless of the business model that we look at. So these are just, I guess, it was quite of a quick tour in terms of the findings that we have from From the surveys, we have one publication in a scientific journal already, which looked at the cooperative and the crowdfunder discrete choice experiment, which was published in Energy Research and Social Science. We're working on 2 more further scientific publications. So one of them is submitted and is under review. The other we're still working on to submit for the peer-to-peer energy trading platforms. And that's kind of really it. If you have any questions, my email is there. And if you have any questions now, I'd be very much happy to answer them. So thank you very much.
Thanks, Ivan. Thanks also for your presentation. It's very important. They need to know what the citizens think about such innovation. You have carried out really great things during the SocialRES project, all these surveys. And also the elaboration of data. We know that it's not easy, it's time demanding. And thanks also for having this 3 relevant paper that will be very relevant for this kind of topic. Any question from the participant? No? So if not, now I give the floor to Karl Harder from Abundance. We were talking about crowdfunding, also you have seen in the surveys. So Karl, I cannot see you where you are. Okay, you are here. Perfect. I don't see your video, but it's fine. You can still be okay. Perfect. It's in a presentation mode. Also the camera is there. Thanks, Karl, for being with us this morning. So, Karl from the UK, the floor is yours. Thanks, Karl.
Brilliant. Hello, everybody. And I'm going to talk a little bit about crowdfunding, and specifically the sort of area of crowdfunding that we worked on within the sort of SocialRES project, pioneering a new way of citizens funding their councils to deliver on their climate emergency plans. So hopefully, yeah, so just a little bit of background about Abundance for those who haven't come across us. So we're what's called a regulated crowdfunding platform. We're regulated by the UK Financial Services Regulator, the Financial Conduct Authority. We were the first platform in Europe to achieve this sort of regulatory status and deliver crowdfunding. So that was back in 2011 that we launched the platform. To date, we've raised 150 million for various climate-aligned projects. We've always been focused on enabling the public to essentially invest and help construct the sort of low carbon world that we all want to see. So we facilitate investment into companies delivering anything from green social housing through to energy generation. And we also facilitate investment into municipalities, local councils, to help them deliver their climate plans. Critical sort of, I suppose, to the whole idea of crowdfunding is that access is as democratic as possible, i.e. open to everyone. So we start with a minimum investment of £5, and then something that's maybe more specific to the UK context is that we've worked with the UK regulator to allow investment through crowdfunding platforms to be sort of, or gain access to the various tax wrappers that exist to encourage saving and investment in the UK. So that's the UK has a variety of different methods for encouraging people to save and invest, and the returns on those investments are tax-free. And we have that sort of ability now within crowdfunding in the UK to deliver tax-free investment. So that's a little bit of the background. What we were focused on in SocialRES is really this sort of development of this plank, which is now sort of main part of Abundance, which is municipal finance. So arranging what we call local climate bonds. So the first of these projects were sort of supported by the SocialRES project to come forward. It was working with 2 UK councils, West Berkshire, which is a rural municipality, and Warrington, which is a sort of, I suppose, post-industrial northern town. So very different sort of places, but SocialRES sort of provided some initial sort of funding to help them step forward and essentially take a bit of a risk by being the first to test this new model of capital raising for councils, where they, rather than going to the sort of traditional models of capital raising that councils have in the UK, which is predominantly borrowing from the UK government centrally, instead borrowing from their citizens. And our challenge was to do that in a way which was efficient, presented value for money for the municipality, effectively saving them money on their traditional models, because if you're not saving them money, then the whole model is regressive, i.e. it will cost the community as a whole cash if the model of raising money from investment from citizens is more expensive. So here's a sort of list of the councils that we've worked with to date, because the West Berkshire and Warrington case study or pilots were successful. We raised £1 million for each council. We saved them money on their sort of traditional borrowing rates and created additional social value, which I'll go into in a little bit more detail further in the presentation. The money raised for Warrington was to part fund a ground-mounted solar park. So we lent 1 million, and the council, from its more traditional borrowing source, borrowed 29 million to deliver this project. In West Berkshire, we raised a similar amount of £1 million, and that was used to fund a variety of projects within the council's climate emergency plan. That included photovoltaics on buildings, energy efficiency measures on roof, on the streets, energy efficient lighting, and some flood defence work. So the key with this model was using the innovation of crowdfunding to create a very low-cost way for the council to raise money from the public. In the UK, if you go back 30, 40 years ago, councils used to raise quite a lot of money from their citizens, but that was stopped because it was delivered via a paper-based process, and over time, that cost of delivering things via paper just wasn't competitive with other sources of borrowing. So it was stopped, and what we've essentially done is bring back this sort of old way of people saving and supporting their communities, but do it in a way that is efficient for councils. So this is just an example of a front page of the offer document for one of the councils. This is Islington. It's a borough within London, or it's a sort of region within London. And it sort of just gives a sort of flavour of the sort of documentation which supports the capital raising. So there's a sort of variety of reasons why a council does this, and the things that we're really focused on are, one, as I referenced already, we have to save the council money on their traditional borrowing costs, otherwise this model is regressive. But the primary interest is around the sort of social value side of raising money from residents as an alternative for traditional borrowing. So in the UK, I think we're at 80% of UK municipalities have declared what we call a climate emergency. And this means they've set very ambitious targets for their region to decarbonize. So very often it's a 2030 target for net zero within the council estate. And very often that also stretches out to trying to deliver regional net zero within 2030 to 2040, which is ahead of the UK government target of 2050. So some really ambitious targets that the councils have, and that means they've got to fund a lot of new infrastructure within their own estates, which they borrow money to deliver, but they've also got to inspire their citizens to make a change. And this is a little bit where the local climate bond comes in. Obviously, it saves money, so that's good. But one of the key roles that a council had is that leadership role, pointing a direction, building confidence within citizens to make change within their own life. So the local climate bond is in many ways is seen just as another communication tool. When a council looks to deliver a suite of projects, raising a green bond from citizens is a chance to tell the story about those projects. And obviously, once people are invested, every 6 months there's an interest payment and a new opportunity to communicate with residents and start to take people on the journey of delivering net zero within region. And over time, you'd hope to build that community and build that body of people within the community who know and understand what the council is doing, and those people then become, I suppose, advocates for the council strategy and feel more engaged with what is going on. one of the other things we've seen, which I'll talk a little bit more about further down the presentation, but is people wanting to do even more than just lending money to their council to deliver net zero. They want to give up their interest that they were getting on their investment and give that back to the council to help the council go further than they would do normally. So this is, in a way, quite an innovation within investment, because more often than not, people don't want to give up their return for the betterment of society. But what we're beginning to demonstrate is that people who live in a place and invest in their place see the return on their investment in a very different way to somebody who's investing from the outside. If you sort of benefit from the things that you are investing in beyond just the financial return, you're more likely to give up some of that financial return to see more of that social return generated. So this is a little bit technical, but well, not technical really, but it's just about the sort of the cost savings, because to get the right to lend money to a council, we have to save the money on the traditional source of borrowing, as I sort of talked about earlier. And this is just some data on the savings we've made now with this new sort of model of saving investment. So this is after our fees, so after the costs of delivering this model. And depending how you measure it, we're saving 0.25% to 0.5%, which, when these 6 councils raised money, interest rates were down at the sort of 1.5% sort of mark. So that's quite a meaningful saving, I think, as we start to move into this higher interest rate world that we're now sort of transitioning to, and the next wave of councils launch, we might see that saving increase in terms of the sort of pure sort of percentage saving, because there's more rate to deal with. So, but these numbers are positive. When you're raising £1 million, it's a relatively small amount of money, but the aim is very much that we start to grow those communities for each council, so that if we're raising £1 million today, in 3 or 4 years' time, we're able to raise the £5–10 million. And then when you're talking about 0.5% to 0.25% of saving, that starts to become very meaningful for a council. This next table starts to sort of illustrate the potential of the donation aspect. So what we're seeing at the moment is that about 11 basis points of effective, also it's about 8% of the total interest paid out is being donated back. But that accounts to another 11 basis points of discount on the interest rate. So another 11 basis points of saving on the traditional borrowing rate that the council would have had. This is, again, it's sort of, it's relatively small sums of money when you're dealing with £1 million, but as you start to scale this, it becomes, quite meaningful. We're also seeing some interesting things. Camden, who are going to be the next authority to sort of pay their first interest payment and therefore test the donation scheme, they had quite a few local businesses who became lenders, and they're sort of indicating they're going to donate a significant proportion of their of their return, perhaps 50%, because they see that as delivering part of their corporate social responsibility agenda. So Camden's donation rate might be up at the sort of 30% mark once it's averaged out with the individuals. So the final piece, just looking ahead, and again, something that sort of SocialRES has supported, is the model we currently run is our sort of maybe our traditional sort of crowdfunding approach to delivering this mechanism. But what we're moving to in 23 is to align the documentation, the issuance process, with what's called the Green Loan Framework. This is an international framework developed by the Loan Market Association for sort of building consistency around green finance, across the globe. So when the UK government issued its green sovereign bond, its green gilt, that was aligned with this framework. When Paris, I think they issued a green bond, that was aligned with this framework. So we've sort of taken this sort of model that sort of works at that sort of macro level, and working with the Loan Market Association, created a model which is appropriate for individual councils, and the next council to launch, which is going to be Westminster Council in London, is going to be the first to align with this new model, which just bring a little bit more rigor to the overall process, so people who are investing have that extra bit of confidence that the money is really going to deliver action on climate. And for the council, it gives a little bit of, I suppose, crudely, a bit of credibility around what they're doing. So that's it. A quick run through of what we've been doing within SocialRES, and then that's fed into the wider research that SocialRES has been doing.
Thanks a lot, Karl. As you know, we have already discussed, I really like these donation schemes. I really think it's amazing to see how the citizens are really contributing to this green energy transition. So thanks also because you developed this great climate bond during the SocialRES project. This is one of the innovation product, I don't know how to call it, of SocialRES. So thanks a lot, Carlo, for your great contribution. Any question from the participant? No, so if not now, I give you the floor to Volker Kromrey from Constance Foundation. We have seen with Karl how crowdfunding is relevant to support the citizens in this transition to clean energy. And now with Volker, we see how the cooperative can give also the great contribution. So Volker, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much.
Yes, we can see the presentation. If you can put in presentation mode, would be great.
Working on it.
Yes. Okay, perfect. Thanks, Volker.
You see the proper screen?
No, it's in presentation mode now.
Wonderful. Okay, yes. Hello, everybody from my side also. I'm Volker Kromrey from Constance Foundation in Germany. With this short presentation on the topic of how energy cooperatives can support citizens, I want to have something like a loop back to our second presentation from Iban. As you remember, he said that cooperatives have not merely economic motivations, but also ecological and social motivations. And by this, cooperatives are beneficial not only to their members, but also to the society as a whole. And in the next slides, I would like to go a little bit more into detail on the different aspects. What you see here is, first of all, I want to tell you where our insights come from. So within this SocialRES project, we worked intensively with our different international case studies. Among those 9 case studies, there were 6 energy cooperatives in different countries. And we were in charge of managing the mutual exchange about trying to learn with each other, from each other, and we moderated that process. On top of this, in general, we work for the last 10 years in Germany with different energy cooperatives. So that also gave us a good background in the analysis of how cooperatives can support citizens. And last but not least, we have had various different projects of working on social innovation and citizen energy. We started off 10 years ago with Bioenergy Region, here a local project, an Isabel project on social innovation and biogas funded by Horizon. We work on a regional PV network in a rural area here. We worked on Coalesce project and Interact project, also on policy recommendations on citizen energy. CSSC Lab, which is another Interact project where we focus on the possibilities for sector coupling and storage possibilities in small communities and municipalities. Also in this project, cooperatives played a vital role. And last but not least, this SocialRES project that we have this webinar on right now. So all in all, we collected experiences and different ideas from a whole bunch of different countries in Europe, at least 11 different countries, that those concrete measurements and projects are from. If you see the energy cooperative as a body, I think all of you have a certain picture in their head. What you combine with cooperative, maybe there's one in your surroundings, but there are different types of cooperatives that I want to put your sight onto. So at first we have the cooperatives that are in the production mode. They're producing, in our case, energy, providing this into the grid, or maybe selling it directly to the customers. It's not important at that stage. So it's a producer cooperative that we also know from the farming systems. On a second level, there's cooperatives that are functioning as energy providers. That can be either providing electricity, or it could be providing heat, selling this, providing this to the citizens, to their members. And then there's a third version of cooperatives that we also find, which are more in the field of combined purchase and offering services to their members. They help to produce energy, for example. They help to save energy. And it's just this combined purchase service that they have, and to increase the purchase power and provide cheaper prices. So all of those different types of cooperatives you find traditionally also in agriculture, but also in the energy business. If we look a little bit more into detail of this, what different types of support for citizens derive out of those three different cooperative types. Here you have them again. Type 1 producers, the supporting and the energy provision. We have different services for the citizens. So in the first case, it's an increase of the individual impact of the cooperative because of this collaborative approach. So if we join forces in agriculture or in energy production, the benefit, the contribution to climate change mitigation, or energy transition is far bigger than if all the individuals are working by themselves. On top of this, it gives every citizen the possibility to participate in energy production, whether they have own houses or areas or not. And by this, they give also the possibility to act, to really be part of it, to become part of energy transition, and to be active whatever the circumstances are. There are the supporting issues. So on the one hand, it's about saving energy. There's a support possibility, for example, for joint retrofitting, for collaborative purchase of different materials to do your retrofitting, to organize that, to have bigger contracts with different businesses. And by this, mainly giving the support to their members, it helps definitely to save energy in the heat sector, maybe also in the electricity sector. It can also be support to produce your own energy, to put solar PV on your roof, to have balcony modules, any type of energy production that the different individuals can join into, and the cooperatives help them to achieve their goals. Last but not least, it's about the energy provision. And here it's, on the one hand, the provision of safe, very important nowadays, cheap, also important nowadays, and renewable energy to their own members. Some of the cooperatives even provide more than this energy, not only to the members, but also to the wider public. And here the focus is, I think, more on the green energy and the local energy. So it doesn't have to be necessarily a cheaper version of energy, but it's, for many people in the society, it's important to have it locally produced and to have renewable green energy. What we also saw in the last years in different countries are developed some ideas, new business models. We heard in the talk of Iban also about the energy communities, renewable energy communities, for example, and cooperatives can function as a so-called facilitator to provide that service. So also when there's new energy communities, they could, instead of just becoming members in the cooperative, start their own version of energy community, but then there's services attached to it, there's know-how needed, and then cooperatives can be the link between those energy communities and, for example, the network providers. And what we also saw, which is mainly seen in the UK, is community benefit pots. It's a form they call community benefit societies, but it can also be implemented very well into existing cooperatives, that a certain small share of the benefits produced of the money goes into those benefit pots, and by those pots, projects can be funded in the community that are not directly linked with the activities of the cooperative with energy production. It can be a playground, it can be a swimming pool, it can be whatever the community is in need of. And by those social benefit pots, community benefit pots, the cooperatives can work on their reception in the community. They can they can work on their social image and also on their social impact, because as we heard, cooperatives don't strive only for our economic benefit, but also for the social benefits. I also brought you some concrete pictures of concrete examples of those different types that we have seen. So very common in Germany, the most common way is the production cooperatives. So we have various cooperatives that invest in big PV installations, PV parks, 1 to 10 megawatts. We have also small wind parks that cooperatives, sometimes alone, sometimes in cooperation with other cooperatives or energy providers, invest in, and by this provide renewable local energy. Also a common system in Germany, but also in some other countries, we've seen this, is renewable heat networks. Can be installed either in the rural area for small villages, but also in a more urban setups. For this system, as the return of investment is generally not huge, it's also a business case which is mostly, at least in Germany, followed by cooperatives. Bigger energy producers are not so interested in that, at least in the last years. They prefer to sell gas to their customers. But those renewable heating networks do exist, several hundred, and more than 95% are run by cooperatives in Germany. We've also seen different mobility services run by cooperatives. For example, in Spain, we've seen car sharing models in Valencia, for example, run with electric vehicles. An example here from Portugal, together with the crowdfunding platform, there's PV installations on the roof of a startup center and working space, a public working space, and the cooperative, for example, can provide this service for customers, different type of customers, businesses that don't want to invest in the installation by themselves. So this can also be a service and a business field for cooperatives. Here's an example of a small self-supportive community in Spain and in the back country of Valencia, off-grid community. They also formed a small cooperative and also for agricultural purposes, but then also they installed PV panels, battery storage, a small windmill, and so on, and being completely self-sufficient on electricity, also run by a cooperative. Last but not least, here's an example of a PV installation on a hospital in Croatia, also funded. Those systems can also be funded, for example, by cooperatives, so that there's a joint venture that, again, like the example shown in Portugal, that the installment of the know-how, the running of the costs and so on, of the installation is done by the cooperative, and there's direct self-consumption in big businesses. And by all those examples, you can see very well how cooperatives, on top of normal energy producers, have a direct link in supporting citizens and supporting the society to run the energy transition. And so in our case, in our opinion, they're a vital player and they play a vital role in the energy transition and in the future energy provision. Thank you for your attention.
Thanks a lot, Volker, for this relevant presentation. As we've seen, also cooperative are really relevant for providing, let's say, a possibility for citizens to invest renewable energies. So, dear participant that you are here with us today, you have no excuse after the webinar of today, either with crowdfunding or a cooperative to invest in renewable energy sources. Any question from the participant? No, I don't see any questions. So I leave now, we are ready now. Thanks, Volker, again, also for your great contribution in SocialRES with your research part. That was really relevant. Now we give the floor to the last speaker from today. We have Kathrin Anger from Adelphi. Kathrin, we provide her point of view from the policy point of view from that we have seen SocialRES. Policy, of course, is really relevant as we have seen to provide the framework condition to enable this kind of social innovation. So thanks a lot, Kathrin, to be with us today. The floor is yours. Please, Kathrin.
Thank you so much, Silvia. Thank you to my colleagues from the consortium, and happy to be here today as well. Welcome, everyone. Let me share my screen and show you my presentation. Silvia, maybe you just give thumbs up if it works fine and everybody sees.
Yes, now is in presentation mode. Thanks a lot.
Okay, wonderful. Welcome to the last presentation of today. My name is Kathrin. I work for Adelphi. We're part of the SocialRES consortium. And I would like to present to you the results from our work, the policy framework conditions for social innovations on the EU and also on the national levels in some of the countries. The outline of my presentation will be, I will give a brief background on who's Adelphi and what is our role in the SocialRES project, very briefly. Then I want to show you some of the results. What did our research find? We looked at legal and policy frameworks and focused on barriers and enablers for social innovations. And then I'll give some insights into the policy recommendations that we're currently working on. Adelphi is based in Berlin, in Germany. We are in the independent think tank and a policy consultancy. Apart from the European Commission and some of the DGs, we work for the national German government, and other clients are listed here, GIZ, for instance, UNDP, European Investment Bank. Also, to name some of them, we focus on the fields of climate, environment, energy, and diplomacy. And we are very happy to be part of the SocialRES project. Our role in this project is we are leading the work package number 5. Concretely, that means we provide policy recommendations that are aimed at the EU level, also at the regional and national levels. We focus on the countries Germany, France, Croatia, Spain, Romania, Portugal, and UK, because they are part of our consortium. And yeah, the main our main task is the policy recommendations, and we always look at how can these recommendations be built that they support social innovations in the energy sector. What are our outputs of this project? We have developed a white paper on good policy practice, where we analyzed the frameworks of the policy conditions in the 7 countries, and we looked how can renewable energy cooperatives, aggregators, and crowdfunding platforms actually act in the markets, on the markets in their countries, and how do the European regulations influence them. We listed concrete barriers enablers, which I'll show you in a second. A toolkit for policy assessment we also created. This evaluates the impacts of social innovations. We have heard this from my colleagues already, that the benefits of social innovations are very, very huge. And there we look at these impacts. How can these impacts be assessed more concretely within the policy process, which we found as very crucial points. The policy recommendations that we're currently working on are compiled to inform and give tailored advice to regional, national, and EU authorities on the policy development. We have conducted several expert interviews with our case study providers in all of the 7 countries, also on EU level. We conducted policy dialogues, kind of focus groups, literature reviews, and all this feeds into our work. Everything's available on the SocialRES website. Now let's look into the results. I want to show you a couple of insights. And we had the question, what are the main barriers and enablers for social innovations to exist on the energy markets? Our research shows that social innovations often struggle in centralized markets. We have heard this already now a couple of times. So if there is no governmental support and state subsidies for the smaller players, the decentralized market players, like the social innovations are, then it gets very difficult for them. And this in turn means the regulatory gaps are there, especially regarding the rights to conduct certain activities. To be a bit more concrete, we identified we clustered 4 areas of barriers. The first is administration and bureaucracy, which is, I guess, not such a big of surprise. The experts we talked to, they said it's very complex and time-intensive authorization processes for all of the 3 actors. So this is one major barrier. The second area is the competitive framework. To give you an example, it's tough for energy communities, for instance, to compete against the large and the traditional players in the tender processes, for instance. Thirdly, the technological and digital infrastructure, for instance, cost and acceptance. To be a bit more concrete, the deployment of smart meters, for instance, and smart appliances, etc. That will contribute to the pace of the uptake of social innovations. And fourthly, financial barriers. For instance, the issue of mistrust and or financial illiteracy amongst investors or people new to the business, especially for crowdfunding. This is one barrier that we identified. Furthermore, our research shows enablers of the energy democracy and the current framework. So what are enablers? What is the conditions that actually support our social innovations? Municipal involvement is key. All of our experts told us that this is very important, not only monetary wise, but also in terms of cooperating with them, raising awareness, so on and so forth. Second, increasing decentralization and prosumership, meaning citizens should really take a stake in the energy system, and the conditions should be there. Financial incentives, here again, to give an example, tax incentives, tax benefits, for instance, for people that want to invest in crowdfunding, for the crowdfunding platforms themselves. And state subsidies play a role, obviously. Fourthly, another enabler, citizen ownership targets. That means developers should include local communities in the ownership of renewable projects, which is already the case. But again, the framework is not set up properly in most of the countries that we talked with experts. To give an idea of the policy recommendations, as I said, we're currently working on these, and we posed the question: how can the barriers be overcome, and how can frameworks be built in a way that it fosters the uptake of social innovations? So this is a spotlight, meaning this list is not complete yet. Recommendations for the EU and the national regional level authorities. What we found is, or what we recommend is that there should be on the EU level more guidance on the transposition of the recast Renewable Energy Directive. There are 2 in the member states, and then the following one that is upcoming and currently under negotiation. For instance, with expert workshops, very concretely to give the member states a bit more of a guidance on how to transpose the directive into national law. The mitigation of administrative barriers. It does sound simple, but this is definitely one major recommendation for all of the 3 specific frameworks that the 3 actors face. So lowering the barriers for the creation and integration of renewable energy cooperatives in the energy market, and also, and this is missing here, for the aggregators and the crowdfunding platforms. Conducting awareness raising and capacity building measures for citizens. For us, it would be on a municipal level, but also it can be done on the European level. Financial literacy is key, definitely, also to promote these innovative tools of financing. The financial incentives, as I said, tax benefits, to give you an example, for both investors and the crowdfunding platforms. So this is just an idea of how the recommendations can look like. We are doing this much more concretely and elaborating on these recommendations in our the final paper, the policy briefs that will be available on the SocialRES website. And I want to give you, to wrap up my presentation, to give you key takeaways of what we've found. We've heard this already several times, but I find it very important to say that again, that these 3 actors play a very important role in the energy transition on the regional level, on the local level. They bring together citizens and play a very important role in community building as well. We believe that awareness raising and capacity building measures are very essential to foster social innovations, to also raise this not in my backyard issue. We can really bring people on one table with these 3 wonderful actors and think that awareness raising and capacity building is essential. And last but not least, very importantly, the benefits of these 3 actors. EU, national and regional authorities should recognize their valuable societal, economical and ecological benefits. As I said, not only do they generate revenue on the regional, local level, but also they bring together people. They contribute to the community building of regions. And I think this is very important, one of the very important key takeaways. thank you very much for your attention. Please don't hesitate if you have any questions or get in touch. Very happy to be further in touch. Thank you so much.
Thanks to you, Kathrin, also for this relevant presentation. As we know, the policy aspects are really relevant for such innovation, and Adelphi was really a great publishing great deliverables and report doing SocialRES. So thanks, Kathrin, again. Let's see if we have any question from the participant or either from you speakers. No, I don't see any question. So I really think we can close these webinars. I would like to thank all the speakers, not only for your contribution today, but for what you have done during the SocialRES project. Today was the last public event of SocialRES. We have our review meeting the 1st of February, but this will be a confidential meeting, I will say. For those that are in Frankfurt at the LEAD conference SocialRES, we have a presentation from Adelphi on Wednesday afternoon, 4:45 in the session Energy Community. I will be there to see the presentation from Adelphi. If you are there, come to our stand. SocialRES will have also a stand. I would like to thank you, Marta and Alice from Icons, because you have organized 14 webinars. So the effort was great, beside your great support for the communication, dissemination, exploitation activities. So thanks again to all you partners. Of course, we keep in touch in this month. I don't disappear now. I would like to thank again the speakers and the participants. And so, Alice, I think we can close the webinars now. Thanks again for your time. Let's keep in touch in SocialRES, because we are still active on social media, thanks to Alice. Thanks again. Have a nice.
Thank you, Silvia.